let's just say that Jesus did live. Let's say he was a real man who lived, preached, and had a small gathering of followers. I'm not aware of him killing millions of people. In the Bible, he doesn't call for the mass extermination.
Oh my God.
Jews. He doesn't set up gulags or concentration camps. He didn't starve.
Neither did Karl Marx, you idiot. I don't want my daughter worshiping the Communist Manifesto either. The principles that made communism so violent, they are in the writing of Karl Marx. And that's why I reject even the writing of Karl Marx. So the fictional character of Jesus didn't personally murder millions. Neither did Mao Zedong. He didn't personally murder millions of people. Celebrating the life of Mao Zedong represents your approval of. Oh my God, this is just the stupidest. Is this guy still in high school? I can't guess his age by his voice.
In the Bible, he doesn't call for the mass extermination of Jews. He doesn't set up gulags or concentration camps. He didn't starve, torture, or imprison his political adversaries. To compare Jesus to Hitler or Stalin is silly. Now,
I'm sorry. I did not, you're just misrepresenting me. I compared Christianity, the empires of Christendom, to the Nazi Empire and the various communist empires, such as the Soviet Union and China. It was very clear what I said. And I asked you a question that you dodged, you didn't answer. I said, which one has killed more people? Okay? Why is Australia full of white people speaking English? How did that happen, homie? Do you think the Christian church, do you think Christendom did
Why is all of North America and South America full of white people speaking English?
Speaking Spanish in South America. Gee, how did Spanish and Portuguese become the majority language of Mexico and everything south of there? Yeah. You got any insight on that? How did Spanish and Portuguese become such widely spoken languages? Why isn't it one of the languages of India? Why isn't everyone speaking Sanskrit, homie? The history of genocide committed in Jesus' name is real. The sickest thing of all is understanding that the Catholic Church, from their perspective, had good intentions in carrying out that genocide because they believed good and evil as they got it from the Bible. Do you think you could have this perspective, white boy, if you were born Cree or Ojibwe or an indigenous person of the Hawaiian Islands? Do you think you would have this perspective that Christianity and Christmas is harmless if you were one of the last people struggling to speak the indigenous languages of California, like Yurok, or out in the middle of the Arizona desert trying to cling to the last of the Dene languages? If you were ethnically a member of one of the peoples destroyed by Christianity.
I do sympathize with your point here, and I don't think you're entirely wrong either.
So why didn't you make a video saying that?
Yeah.
Exactly what, we're now in the last minute of the video, exactly what has been missing here is sympathy. You could have opened with, this is a middle-aged man. I'm 40 years old. I have a 5-year-old daughter. This is a man who wants to do better for his own daughter and his own family, who's struggling to provide an alternative to Christmas and something meaningful in his daughter's life, and who's interested in publishing this storybook so you also, with way less effort, can buy the storybook and read your kids something meaningful that's not rooted in Christianity or communism or Islam or something awful. Why isn't there sympathy, and why isn't there a positive tendency, like I said before, to recruit talent for us to work together?
Et maintenant, nous commençons.
So what I do on YouTube has changed from one period to the next. And everything I've done on YouTube up to this point, the year 2018 ending, has been a combination of the personal and the political. Like, when I talk about First Nations politics, Indigenous people, genocide, history of colonialism, it's personal. It's political, but it doesn't have the quality of a detached academic lecture or presentation. That was a decision I made from the first moment I got on YouTube. Now, what I'm doing, foreshadowing, hashtag spoilers, it's going to change in 2019. I'm changing my format. I'm changing what I'm doing. But I've really been reminded about how phony and insincere most of the discourse here is on YouTube, and even worse on Reddit. Reddit is really a step down from YouTube.
It is.
I don't even do Facebook groups. I haven't for years. I don't know. Anyway,
You're the manager of like a
yes, that's right. No, there are still
vegan group.
Yeah, there's at least one Reddit group I still own.
Yeah, and
I'm still a manager of.
Vegans learning Chinese. If you're vegan and you're learning Chinese, you can join
this is not
Facebook group.
This is not a promo for my Facebook group. But let's not digress. But look, when I came out with, starting to talk about my attempt to offer my own daughter a superior alternative to pop culture entertainment and modern Western secularized Christmas. It's personal and it's political. It's real. You know, I really am writing this series of poems, series of new children's stories that I think I will eventually publish as a book, or maybe a series of children's books. They're going to be illustrated. They could be made into some short cartoons here on YouTube to promote the book or something. This is a creative project I'm engaged in. And the level of cynicism and hostility I got back, it reflects partly something that's just wrong with the internet. But it reflects something that's wrong with activism on the internet. And I think I can say that. I think that's true of the kind of stereotypical left-wing social justice warrior activism. I think it's true of the stereotypical right-wing or alt-right or, I don't know, trad thought, conservatism on the internet. I think it's true of vegan activism. I think it's true of a lot of things. What we've come into is a really weird period of the culture of complaint. So as one example of this, it's always misleading to use selective quotations of what your opponents have to say. But I got a comment on YouTube just yesterday of someone saying to me, and it has this kind of spirit of the 4chan over-the-top comment or the Reddit, insulting, backhanded compliment kind of thing. This guy wrote to me with all due self-confidence saying, no, you're totally wrong. Atheists don't need to be activists. They don't need to get politically organized to try to change the society or culture where they're living. All we need to do is laugh at and ridicule the people who still believe in religion. And the internet has really magnified that sentiment across the board. I think there are a lot of anti-racist people, and they might not say it that openly, but they really think the way to make society less racist is by coming on Twitter or coming on Reddit and ridiculing people for being racist.
Do you think how it is with veganism?
Yeah, I think
ridiculing meat eaters is better than activism.
I think that's one of the cross currents. Yeah. I don't think it's the main one because veganism is in some ways a strangely upbeat, optimistic, and compassion-driven movement, and you see that agony. One of my first hit videos was called "The Agony of Activism," and I break down weeping in it briefly, and you talk about going to a slaughterhouse and seeing and hearing pigs getting slaughtered. Most of these other movements don't have that kind of touchstone of like, hey, I know what it's like to watch a pig have its throat slit and bleed to death, and I know what it doesn't have that kind of
Yeah, that's interesting. And today the anti-racist movement doesn't have of course there's centuries of racism to go off of there, but
are you personally touched by it in that kind of immediate moving way? Yeah. Right. So it's also obviously the case that ridicule is easy to do, and organizing real political opposition, mobilizing people to influence Congress is not so easy.
Yeah.
And doing something like writing and publishing an original storybook is not easy.
Yeah.
So it's funny. From my perspective, what I'm doing is just totally positive in this case. And look, I just want to say this. If you don't know my channel, I don't think marching up and down the street, holding a placard and shouting that Parliament... I don't think that kind of street protest is 100% positive. I think it's mostly a waste of people's time. And there are negative elements to it, and I've talked about this before. The people who are just trying to go to work and have to literally walk past the protesters every day, it actually does have negative impacts on perception. There are advantages and disadvantages to street demonstrations. I think there's a lot of people are kidding themselves about conventional political protest in terms of jockeying for cultural and political change. Mm-hmm. But if you're talking about giving people an alternative, like, hey, you know what? Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. It sucks. Why are you teaching your children this? I think, ironically, this is something most conservative Christians would agree with also. They'd say, why are we doing this? Why are we worshiping like a cultural icon that was mostly invented by the Coca-Cola Corporation? how is this what Christmas became?
Right.
And,
just yesterday we were downtown, and the bus system here, they actually have a Santa, like somebody dressed up as Santa driving one of the buses around downtown.
Right.
And it's like, why are we
why are we all complicit in this? Either from a Christian or an atheist perspective, at some point just taking a step back and saying the meaninglessness of this, whether you regard it as commercial and secular or as something linked to a religion, I actually suppose it's a bit chafing. This is a problem for me. And again, just positively, hey, we can do better. Now, look, the other side of it, again, I mean, okay, I'll say more about this. To what extent do I expect anyone on the internet to respect my opinion or treat me like a human being? My expectations are pretty low. I have 5 years of experience being a public figure on the internet and over 1,000 videos and over 3.2 million views on YouTube. And even before that, I was really a public figure in Buddhism as a highly critical, free-thinking, nihilistic philosopher and scholar within the Buddhist religion. And of course, I got a lot of negative reactions to what I was doing there. However, my daughter is bright. I'm not going to do most parents on the internet. Oh, my kid's a genius. I'm not going to say that to you. But my daughter, I think she's like a lot of kids, which is that she often says things that are kind of remarkably sharp and witty and insightful. And then you only figure out later on that she memorized that from a TV program or from a storybook. Some of the things she said to us are sentences memorized from a children's storybook. And only later we read the story or, we figure out how much of her vocabulary and how much of her behavior is mimicry of cultural sources. Okay? Christmas is one of those holidays that is celebrated every year. And there are components of Christmas that are taught in schools. And there are Christmas fables and songs that are played over the loudspeaker in coffee shops and shopping centers and while you buy your groceries. The extent to which my daughter memorizes and internalizes a cartoon from Netflix, these days it's mostly not conventional TV broadcasting, or her favorite storybooks, or songs she sings at school. Some of the songs she learns are at school. Yeah. It's something to be taken really seriously. So even if your position is, oh, well, Christmas is meaningless. Look, I think Curious George is meaningless. That's not the end of the debate. That's not the end of the conversation. Why can't we step back and say, whoa, let's deal with the burden of meaninglessness here? Like, how is it in your mind that meaningless equals good? If your argument is that Christmas is genuinely just as meaningless as Curious George, to me it's okay, well, both of those for me are problematic. I don't want my daughter's whole life and culture and outlook to be shaped by crap like Curious George and Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. Again, yes, Mickey Mouse is not evil. You know what I mean? And it's true, Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and Curious George, they're not linked to a religion that is guilty of genocide on several continents the way Christmas is. It is different. But we don't solve the problem by emphasizing the extent to which Christmas is similar to other purely commercial children's products. We only further explain it, right? You want to jump in?
No, I mean, I thought we were sitting down to watch this video.
I'm gonna click it. So I'm gonna click on one response to this, and this is titled "The Atheist Who Stole Christmas," and we'll see what he says. But at this point, obviously, my expectation is the more of the same. That this is just going to be a completely hostile, completely negative response from someone who, again, the way I posed this initially was to draw attention to the difference between destructive and creative aspects of atheism, nihilism, and the pursuit of cultural change. The most successful political movements are going to be political movements that achieved the cultural change first and then pursued the legislative, formally political element second. Really quickly, in Canada, the culture accepted homosexuality decades before legislation normalized homosexuality. So, I mean, homosexuality in general, you can use gay marriage in specific, but probably the most important part of that was the protection of employment rights for gay people. That you couldn't be fired from your job for being gay, that you couldn't be fired for being a school teacher because you're gay. So the cultural change happened first. That was the big struggle. And then the legal and formal parliamentary political changes were relatively easy. If you want to pass the same law in Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, Indonesia, you're going to have a very different struggle on your hands, right? Because the cultural change hasn't happened first. There you're talking about the legal and political change being forced on people first, and the culture catching up, what have you, afterwards, right? And I could throw out a million examples here. We're not going to do that. So in terms of what's possible for powerless people like myself, the pursuit of cultural changes is really meaningful. And so I just did... Okay, I have a lot to say about this. I have a lot to say about this without even replying to the video.
Okay.
But Melissa, you remember we were walking down the street the other day, and we passed a dressmaker shop, a fashion shop. Mm-hmm. And it's in an expensive neighborhood here in Victoria. I would assume that 100% of their customers are wealthy, elderly white women. Wealthy white women over the age of 50, let's say. Okay. And I said to you, you know what? In political movements and in fashion and entertainment and theater and in many different walks of life, one of the signs that what you're doing is legitimate is that you're actually looking to recruit new talent. If what you're trying to do in fashion is recruit new talent, you say, hey, yeah, we have this dressmaker. Hey, wow, great. We'd love to meet someone who's just graduated from fashion school, who's a designer and really knows how to cut fabric and really knows how to do something new. That's a sign that what you're doing is legitimate, that you're legitimately out there trying to do whatever it is a dressmaker does, do whatever it is you can to contribute to fashion or to your own movement, your own movement within fashion, put it that way, you know. And on the contrary, a shop like that, the one we walked past, I said, I can guarantee to you, if you walked into that shop with your resume in hand and said, hey, I just graduated from the School of Art and Design in New York City or Milan. I'm a young, up-and-coming dressmaker and fashion designer. I really know how to cut fabric. I'm really ambitious, and I'm really looking to start at the bottom and get some experience making dresses in a shop like this. What they'd say to you is, look, we're not hiring. We're not really looking to expand what we do here in any way. We're not looking to make any new styles or patterns. We're just making money recycling old crap to rich elderly people. We're not, sorry. In a sense, this is not a real dressmaker. This is not real fashion. That's not what's really going on here. And it's always bothered me. I mean, whether it's vegans looking at what I'm doing, atheists, so-called atheist activists, secular activists, new atheists looking at what I'm doing on the internet, or even within Buddhism, Asian studies, politics, why is it so lacking, the capacity for people to want to recruit talent? What does it say about you and your institution and your organization? So I could mention a million different forums that I haven't been, I'm not welcome to speak at, and channels I'm not welcome to collaborate with. Where, so again, even if you just look at the videos, if you just look at the videos I uploaded on YouTube within the last 1 month, there's really good reason why an atheist, some other atheist YouTuber or atheist activist could look over this stuff and say, oh, hey, you know what? This guy is talent. This guy has something positive to contribute. Even if you disagree with me. And believe me, do you think dressmakers, do you think fashionistas, do you think people in the fashion industry all agree with each other? No, of course not. They have deep, bitter disagreements about matters of style that to you and I are invisible or don't matter at all. Likewise, people within veganism, people within Buddhism, people within humanitarian work, people within atheist activism, they're going to be disagreements, some of which are substantive and some of which may be more petty. But okay, I'm just looking at the list of videos I did within the last month, critique of Alain de Botton on Atheism 2.0, response to Monkey Jones getting his channel banned, the atheism is destructive, not atheism being creative, not destructive. There are, of course, a whole bunch of videos about veganism, dating, to what extent is Buddhism a philosophy, about health effects of antidepressants. Okay, there's a whole lot of substantive content here. Mm-hmm. And guys, I'm in the opposite position all the time. People write to me asking to collaborate with me, asking to cooperate with me or something. And I have to look at their channel and look at what videos they've made over the last couple of months, and I have to make a judgment. Is this someone I could work with? Is this someone I could co-sign or collaborate with or something? But the absence of any capacity for recruiting new talent, cooperating or collaborating, it shows, in a sense, that your movement is fake. Like, if PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, is not open to working with me, what does that say about PETA? And if you dial back, it's about 20 years ago. They were open to working with Gary Yourofsky. It's a little bit shocking and embarrassing to both sides there. They used to take on some really edgy and offensive people as their formal spokespeople. They put support by, so you can see those specific institutions. They're willing to take a risk. They're willing to get involved with someone who has some really offensive and extreme opinions. So I think some institutions, some political movements go through different phases where the doors are open and they're interested in collaborating with people, interested in recruiting recruiting new talent. And they can go through a more narrow phase where nobody's allowed in and the doors are closed. And like that shop, they're just trying to keep making money off of repeating the same pattern, on YouTube, repeating the same content they already had. Mm-hmm. So I feel like we're in a period of time when certainly the atheist and secular category has really become very, very dark and dim and closed to new ideas. All right. Okay. So I have a lot to say before pressing play.
I know, you've brought up so many topics. I don't even know how I could... respond. That's like a lot of. We're talking for like 17 minutes. I wish I had something to say for each of those topics, but then it would be like an hour long, and the point of the video was to watch this other YouTube video. I mean, I can complain about how much I hate that it's inescapable. I mean, when you're walking around downtown, it really bothers me that I can't escape Christmas, and I don't even know why conservative people think that it's an issue at all, that you're trying to take Christ out of Christmas or like trying to remove Christmas at all, and it's too PC to say season's greetings or whatever.
But I think you should clarify
like
a bit though.
Santa everywhere, like lights. I was like,
But your experience is not just in Canada and the United States. We have a lot of experience with this also in Europe, right? But I just mentioned, in terms of walking around and having the presence of...
Oh, yeah, in Europe, too, for sure.
Yep.
And I mean, like, just this morning I was walking, I took a walk at, like, 6 in the morning, and I didn't realize there's a construction site that we walked by, and they put Christmas lights all over the construction site just to make it more festive and stuff. And I mean, like, I see how much effort is put into decorating and, completely changing the decor in grocery stores, in, department stores, basically everywhere you go, even the gym that we go to. Like, they put snowflakes on all the gym equipment. They have this, 25 days of Christmas acts of kindness that you can do, and everything's just decked out. There's even a Christmas tree, and, they have a drawing of, the Santa that's buff or something,
Yeah.
Merry Liftmas, so I mean, I can't escape it. And when I sit down in Starbucks with Eisel to sit down and work on Chinese, for me it really bothers me that everywhere I go there's music playing. I mean, if you think back just 50 years ago, music was more of a special occasion thing. You only heard it when you went to a concert, when you wanted to actually hear music, or later on you could have
become
a record.
Wallpaper surrounding you all the time in society, right?
It's really, I mean, sometimes it's music that is so emotionally overwrought. It's how can I ignore this? How can I ignore somebody saying that they're basically suicidal over a heartbreak or something while I'm sitting here eating a salad,
Well, and some of those songs are saying our Lord and Savior has come. I mean, some of them are.
Some more explicitly than others. But when we're sitting in Starbucks and you're trying to work on Chinese, I don't want to hear Mariah Carey talking about all she wants for Christmas is you. I don't want to
Well, and the question I put to you, this is just us joking amongst ourselves, but I say to you, how would people react if this were Muslim music? How would people react if this were...
Yeah, if it were
what if these were pictures
on end of some stations, radio stations?
But even the decoration. After, how would you react if you go to the gym and there's Muhammad the Prophet, or and anything even symbolically related to Islam instead, or anything Hindu gods and Hindu celebrations?
Right.
If you guys want to play this game so this happened with a lot of U.S. courthouses, where the courthouses displayed the Ten Commandments. So I don't know if you know this is not just one example. This is something that's happened repeatedly in the United States, and where the state government said, well, it's not religious because we would allow any other religion also to have a monument in front of the courthouse. So, like, it's all religions are equal, having the Ten Commandments and the Bible displayed. This isn't religious. And then in one case, it was actually the Satanists who applied. And they said, okay, well, then we want equal time. We want equal space. We want to have a monument to Satan next to the this, they did it obviously half parody and half as a serious protest. If you're going to have a monument to the Ten Commandments, then you can also have a monument to Satan. And the state government changed their interpretation of secularism and said, okay, no monuments for any religion, as opposed to equal monuments. But none of those places have a monument to Buddhism or Hinduism or Islam. They're next to them. And I don't believe in that. That, for me, became most dicey in France when I was formally enrolled in the process to become a French citizen. I did not complete that process. I'm not a French citizen. But it was really fiercely debated what secularism meant in France. And in French, it's laïcité. So it's not exactly the same meaning as secularism or atheism in English. And I was pointing out to the instructor, your interpretation of secularism is a mosque on every corner. Like, that's literally what you're teaching us, is that, as long as people have plenty of mosques and churches to choose between, that's secularism. And to me, it's not. That's not a secularism. And but you just mentioned walking around the streets in France.
Yeah.
That's government money going into Christmas festivals. It's government money going into a whole society festooned with church architecture. Everywhere you go, every block, there's Christian architecture, Christian monuments. And I mean, yes, Christmas may be the thin edge of the wedge. I mean, it's not the same as a giant marble statue of Christ on the cross bleeding. But you have both. They're not mutually exclusive. One is reciprocal with the other.
Yeah.
And do you want to become a society that, in addition to the government giving 300,000 euros for a Christmas market, where they say, okay, secularism means we treat religions equally, so we're also going to provide a 300,000 euro budget for an Islamic festival that's similar. Is this what you want to get into, and where does it stop? I mean, sorry, even if it's just those two religions, even if it is just, well, let's say it's the big three, because that's the French government's attitude, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And that was their attitude in the formal meetings to become a French citizen. I don't want to live with that. I don't want to live in a threefold religious society. I want to live in an actually secular society.
Yeah, I mean, part of the season's greetings, like, anti-season's greetings is like, oh, they're trying to take Christianity out of society.
Right.
Whereas other people are like, oh, no, it's a good thing because, and as you say, it's possible that we could have more decorations out for different religious holiday, holiday events. But I don't want that either, and like I agree with you. For the first 24 years of my life, so I'm 26 now, I spent every Christmas in the Detroit area, visiting with family. We did the same thing every year. Growing up, I grew up in a Christian household. We went to church every Christmas Eve and then Christmas Day. And, it was definitely centered around the religion. But of course, as a kid, it's more fun to open presents. Like, that aspect of it is more fun for a child. And, as I grew up and as I basically came out as an atheist to my parents, like, and said, I don't believe in this. It became more and more of a, I don't know, just more like a conflict. The going to church, that was
right.
Like the event. This was the celebration with our family, and I still would go even though I wasn't Christian anymore. And it was just like this inner conflict, or just like kind of feeling like a hypocrite. Like, why am I even here? So, I mean, I dealt with that for, I don't know, quite a few years. And last year when I was with you in Thailand was the first time I ever was in a place that it wasn't being celebrated. And I actually got to have Christmas in Thailand. And it was like just so much of a relief, because I feel like people stress out so much about these holidays too. And like, it's such a big deal for everybody, and it's become even more commercialized and stuff. That it's just like unnecessary stress for something that like we don't even believe in anymore. I mean, okay.
And statistically, it's a big percentage of people's income. Like, just the amount of shopping and expenditure and holiday money and travel money. Most people who are moderately poor or middle class, Christmas is a big percentage of income. Go on, yeah. I
mean, I know other society, like, Chinese New Year is the biggest holiday.
Yes, it's true.
Like, it totally changes the schedule. But I mean, it is really like even with the schedule of seeing your daughter, I mean, like we're thinking about moving to Taiwan and like how this is not going to line up if we want to do Chinese language courses because Christmas
we plan our lives around.
Christmas is just not a thing in Taiwan. Like I know, after seeing some like I'm in Facebook groups for Taiwan, there are like Christmas trees and stuff. But and like,
about 2% of people in Taiwan are Christian.
Yeah, same in Thailand. It was like the big mall had a big Christmas tree out front, but like things weren't closed for Christmas, and there weren't churches all around, and it was more of a commercial thing.
No, there were Buddhist temples all around.
Secular,
You're saying it's a predominantly Buddhist society.
Yeah, right. So anyway, I thought that was so much better, and like not having the pressure of buying everybody presents, and like if it's really about generosity, like I know some people say that Christmas is just about like the spirit of giving, and that's what Santa's all about, giving out presents to the needy, and I think some people, the only time of the year that they actually do giving for the holiday, like, is only during Christmas. Like, that's the only time that they would think to donate food. Like, out at our gym, they have a bucket for donating food to this organization, and it's only around Christmas time. Like, that's the only time of the year. And I think a lot of nonprofit organizations bank on people trying to get into the giving spirit only in December. It's like, if you really want to live in a society that's celebrating this, like why isn't it more of the year that you're thinking of this? Like, why can't it be the rest of the year we're not even thinking about that?
I just mentioned I know someone who's a PhD in German philosophy, and she's one of the only people who has read this really, really influential book in the history of philosophy, politics, and especially religion, called Wesen des Christentums by Feuerbach. That is one of the most influential books that nobody reads anymore. It was a huge hit, hugely influential book in German philosophy. And exactly what you just said, which is what many quote-unquote atheists say to justify Christmas. They say, oh, well, Christmas is about the spirit of generosity. Okay. Do you think we can't do that with Ramadan? Do you think we can't say Ramadan is about the spirit of blank? Do you think we can't make quote-unquote secular humanistic values placeholders to maintain a fundamentally conservative Christian society, conservative Muslim society, and to, drown the potential for atheists, skeptics, and freethinkers to transform the society they live in? Right now, what do you have to say to atheists in Saudi Arabia? If you've met Arabs, they're intelligent people. I mean, they're not... There's this really horrible racist conceit in the West that somehow people born Muslim are born mentally disabled. They're not. I'm telling you, go out and spend time with them. A lot of them, they're as smart as you and I. I mean, they really, biologically, they're not at a disadvantage this way. They're not. Whether it's Saudi Arabia or one of these other cultures, what they are people that live in a culture that punishes dissent, punishes freedom of thought and challenging orthodoxy, challenging social assumptions to an extent you cannot imagine. It's an oppressive culture, and that's what our culture used to be like only a number of centuries ago. I mean, it depends on where you were in Europe, but I mean, just dial back to Italy 500 years ago. Look at the Spanish Inquisition in Spain. It's a little bit different, the timeline for each of the Western European countries or Eastern European countries for how we emerge from having that kind of hyper-authoritarian, hyper-conformist society. But you would not say this to a Muslim. You would not say to a Muslim, you should be satisfied with just... Sorry, I mean an ex-Muslim. You would not say to a Muslim atheist, an ex-Muslim atheist, you should be satisfied to silently conform in your culture and just keep observing Ramadan, keep observing Eid, keep doing animal sacrifice, keep participating in all these festivities while not believing in them because they represent the spirit of generosity or the spirit of blank, fill in the blank. You would never do that. So, and again, I know to some people these are shocking examples, but they're real examples. If you live in a communist society and you don't believe in communism and you actually do recognize that communism is responsible for the deaths of tens of millions of people, I'm sorry, I live in Canada. The Anglican Church has blood on its hands. I don't regard the Anglican Church as harmless. I don't regard the Catholic Church as harmless. Just within the history of my own country, of Canada. I don't have to go as far as Australia or South America or other examples, or medieval Europe. Right here in Canada, within the last 100 years, there are crimes I do not forgive that the Catholic and Anglican Church committed. And they've gone to court for them and blah, blah, blah. I mean, they're on the record. This stuff ain't secret. So, by the same token, you would not say to someone who was an ex-communist or free-thinking communist, well, you should just blend in. You should just accept the fact that Lei Feng Day, so that's one I talked about in the earlier video, that's the spirit of helping orphans and helping elderly people, and we should just celebrate that because those are good communist virtues, even if you don't believe in communism. Anyway, that is a discourse that actually came to the fore in Europe, specifically because of Feuerbach, who had this hit book called Wesen des Christentums. And that was his solution. That was his atheism 2.0. That was his way forward for atheism, was for atheism to move forward as being a new religion of humanity, of what is truly human, to take the human virtues out of religion and then celebrate those and hold them up. And interestingly, one of the most powerful negative reactions against that was Max Stirner, who's another philosopher I've talked about on this channel, who said, no, what you're doing, the real effect of what you're doing is to take Christianity out of the church and to Christianize all of society, where now it's not just the church, it's not just going to church on Sunday that's Christian. Now all of society is going to become sanctified and religiousized with this view that makes these into even more dominant, a humanistic religion. And interestingly, so just now my critique of Alain de Botton and Atheism 2.0, that actually is parallel to that discourse in 19th century philosophy, where it's saying, oh, you think you're making things better by taking religion out of the church and putting it into the university system, making compulsory moral and ethic education part of the university system and putting it into the arts and museums and filmmaking. No, this is actually the sanctification. This is making sacred. This is bringing religion into more and more of society as opposed to less and less.
Yeah.
So interestingly, that's actually a discourse. All of my viewers who have a PhD in German philosophy, you know what I'm talking about, but that's actually a rare case of something in academic philosophy that's still relevant in the real world. Okay, so let's click on this video, babe. Okay. I mean, thanks. I mean, I'm glad you said all that, and I think it's really true. Again, the first thing I said in this video, this isn't a dry academic lecture. This is something that's part of our real lives. For me, whether I'm walking the streets of Montreal or I'm walking the streets of Paris, France, whether it's, Vancouver or Toronto or London, England, I see this around the world. Yeah.
Okay, one more thing that was on my mind. Christmas is for me, growing up, there was two sets of lies that I had to find out were lies. First was Santa Claus.
Yeah.
I remember the exact day. I think I was probably 6, but I remember I was on a swing set at my cousin's house. My cousin that I've told you about. That's kind of a biatch.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. I know the cousin. Yeah.
Yeah. So she she spilled the beans to me, as they say. Use a vegan phrase that Santa was not real. It wasn't even Christmas time either. It was just the spring, and I don't know. I guess she thought it would be funny to tell me, she was a couple years older than me.
Santa is a lie.
Yeah. And I was like, what? Oh my gosh. And heartbroken. Because, it's... And but of course that's not that big of a deal because you still get presents and it's still it's really not that big of a deal. My parents just lied to me about this fictional creature that comes down the chimney.
Right.
I mean, I guess at 6 years old you may think that a child could just come to that conclusion naturally that Santa's not real.
Six is a tough age, but go on.
But I was ignorant and cheerful and just was kind of going with it.
Sure.
And same with Christianity or same with religion. I was a very obedient child. I did what my parents told me. So when I was learning about Christianity and going to Christian Bible school and stuff, and I just took my parents' word for it. Every night I would say prayers with my mom and stuff, and when I was getting into my teenage years, I started having really more philosophical thoughts about it and thinking more basic atheist thought is that if there's all this pain and suffering in the world. Like, why would God inflict that if God knows all and if he's omnipotent and omniscient, why would he do this? So then, I came to know about atheism somehow. I really don't even know. Like, I guess it was like maybe friends. Like, I noticed that some friends of mine just didn't go to church, and like,
Yep.
And I was just like, okay, there's a different way to live your life, and not say prayers at night. Just hug your parents at night and tell a bedtime story, but not say prayers.
I think it still is a rift. I think it still is a rift within your family today.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Oh yeah. I mean, with veganism too, they use it as an excuse. God brought.
Well, no, I just say within your family there are the people who lean towards atheism, and the people who still really remain with the church.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That's all. It's not like a super overt,
it's true,
screaming at the dinner table thing, but you can see it anytime there are people around it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You can see who leans which way.
Both my brothers are still kind of conflicted about it because one of them has a child of their own, and he's the one in the relationship that's actually not atheist. Like, his wife is atheist, and he's like, he kind of feels like he should get the child baptized and like do all these things that my parents did. So anyway,
you want to work that out before you get married, people.
Yeah.
You want to figure. Don't leave that till after.
Yeah, right. So anyway,
don't leave that till after pregnancy. That's a real bad move. Yeah, right. Yeah.
So after I started realizing on my own, or just like somehow I legit don't remember like how I first came into the thought that God isn't real. I guess it was probably just whatever I was reading in school, honestly, that convinced me of that. Yeah. But then it was like a whole other set of lies that I had to peel back.
Right.
So Christmas is just, to me, like lying to children in multiple ways, more ways than one. Yeah. And hypocritical. And,
right.
Yeah. Anyway.
So anyway, just say really briefly, I've done videos on this in the past. I could do more videos, but I was raised by communists. And I think I'd say they were communist extremists or communist fundamentalists, which created very different conflicts. But like Alain,
complete opposite.
Right, but like Alain de Botton, this showed out a video that went up within the last 24 hours on my channel. So it's a new video. But like Alain de Botton, it is fair to say both of my parents really yearned for, really desired the accoutrement of religion. They still really wanted religion and religiosity in their lives.
Yeah.
And I would not say that's true of the majority of communists. I don't. But there is definitely a minority of communists that you meet often enough who still really want and value religion one way or another. Mm-hmm. And of course, one of the big lies in my family was the extent to which my father really had been religious for a significant part of his life before I was born, and how that changed his whole life too.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of lies along
Some of his
those
children
lines.
are named after, have biblical names.
And it shows. Yeah. So, but communism also, as I was raised with it, the form of extreme or fundamentalist communism, it is also a religion built on lies. And there was a different process of figuring out what those lies were.
Yeah.
As a result.
For you,
right.
This is still delaying the video. But
that's good.
For you, you grew up with these writings that you actually, as a teenager you read and you were able to dissect.
Even as a child. But go on, yeah.
But I feel like there's another layer of was I really raised Christian? Because as I've been with you, you've talked about, you've read the Bible.
I know the Bible way better than she does. That's right.
I was taught stories as a kid. I would,
you got just sort of Noah's Ark presented as a separate little story without,
things like Veggie Tales and stuff. And whatever my mom would read to me, or or whatever the sermon was at church. There was the passage of the Bible. But I would sing songs, hymns.
That's right. Yeah.
Were based off of
music was a big part of your education.
Oh yeah, massively. And it's funny, even in choir in high school.
But it is fair to say when you started this relationship, you had no knowledge of the history of the Bible, where the text comes from, and those questions of
right.
Where
it was originally written.
Who
in
wrote
Greek,
the story? This kind of thing, right?
Right. Yeah. All these things that I've learned through being with you, and I mean, it's great. I feel more enriched, and that I've been uncovering these lies, or uncovering these half-truths that I was told as a child. But that's another layer of it with Christmas that I just want to say, you're not really if you're Christian and reading about Jesus Christ. Like, I mean, this is I don't know, it's not really what is focused on today with Christmas, but it is where it's from.
Yes.
So it's just this like
Right.
hypocritical
Right.
thing. Like, why
Right.
are we like
same thing-
celebrating
right.
the birth of Jesus Christ? And that's really what this is all about.
Right.
You know.
But look, same thing
sorry,
with
I
Mao
was-
Zedong and so
Yeah,
on.
I was
Look,
trying
I mean,
to contrast it with what you were saying
same
about
thing with all
growing up
stuff.
communist. That you know, celebrating these communist leaders.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
Lenin. And
So look, just to bring it back to the core point of this video, and then we're gonna hit play, and we're gonna respond to this other video about me.
okay.
You know, my reaction to all of this is to try to do something positive, to try to create something new in the culture, to try to write new children's literature. And I would be very interested not just in publishing storybooks for children, but in doing a cartoon on Netflix or YouTube or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, I'm interested in the production of new cultural forms. And of course, when I'm making, you've seen the stories, Christians could also consume them. Muslims, in theory, could also consume it. Wouldn't, I mean, it's, you know, same with Disney. Probably plenty of people who believe in religion consume Disney.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Disney is secular. They actually have a corporate commitment to only doing secular children's entertainment. They don't have religious content in their films or in the actual park, the actual Walt Disney World, Walt Disneyland type of parks. But another element of this that reflects how cosmopolitan we are in our lives, and I'm not boasting, I have no choice. I travel all around the world constantly and have done for the last 20 years or more, well, really all my life. Yeah. It's not just the cultural poverty of children's literature in English that I'm complaining about. In all these other languages I've studied, including German, but Chinese, Japanese, Laotian, Thai, Cambodian, I've been looking at what's available in terms of, you know, new culture for children's literature. And this is a need all around the world. And part of this is about atheism versus religion. Part of it is about nihilism versus communism, because I also reject communism. But, you know, part of it is also about new versus old, that we just do need new culture to replace old culture. Because even the secular fables for children in German, like Max and Moritz, but I mean, the stuff that exists in German and French culture from 100 years ago, or even stories like Little Red Riding Hood. Little Red Riding Hood is about girls being raped. I mean, that's what it's about, guys. I've read the original text. And, you know, what's actually there, you know, to be shared with children. You know, we really do have a challenge. We have a challenge to generate new culture for the next generation. That is an acute need in every culture I've studied, in every language I've studied. Not just English, and not just in rejecting Christianity or Islam. Let's hit play. But even the most hardcore intellectual atheists here on YouTube, who posture as some kind of, I don't know, extreme secularists who are out to transform society, even they say that the celebration of Christmas is just no problem at all. Why, it's as secular as the American Constitution, or taking your vows on a stack of Bibles when you go to court. It's perfectly secular. There's no problem with that. There's no problem with Santa Claus. Santa Claus isn't in the Bible. Maybe we don't even need to comment. Maybe we can just end our video by just playing this intact.
Mr. Atheist, you really are a heel. You're as cuddly as a cactus. You're as charming as an eel. Mr. Atheist.
These same people, these secularists and atheists, would never make the same excuses for raising their children with the annual celebration of a Muslim holiday. If you actually look at some of the Hindu and Buddhist holidays, what actually happens in them, thinking of a certain Hindu celebration in Nepal that involves slaughtering and sacrificing large numbers of cattle. We still have that going on in some sects of Judaism also. You might be surprised at the durability of animal sacrifice as a concept in the 21st century.
So the Hindu event you're referencing here is the Gaudiya Mai festival, which is a mass slaughter of animals meant to appease, you guessed it, Gaudiya Mai, a goddess of power. Now on the left side of your screen, you'll see a photo of the aftermath of this disgusting festival in 2014. Somewhere in the vicinity of 300,000 animals were beheaded during that particular festival. On the right, you're going to see a nativity scene. Comparing the two seems unfair, to say the least. There's a distinct...
What? Sorry, how many turkeys are slaughtered for Christmas? How many people eat people? I'm sorry, what?
Wow.
I'm sorry.
Just because it's not in a huge field like this, and you can't take photos of it.
Sorry, homeboy, we're vegan.
How many
You're barking up the wrong tree
cows?
right now. 300,000 cows ain't shit compared to the amount of beef consumed on Christmas. You kidding me? But also, the examples I gave, it wasn't a direct comparison. I said there are Muslim holidays that involve animal sacrifice. There are Jewish holidays. Within Israel, which forms of Judaism still perform those? But some of them do still carry out the biblical animal. If you've read the Old Testament, animal sacrifice is part of Old Testament Judaism. Very few Christians still do it, but in Israel, it's a thing for Jews to slaughter a lamb. It's in there. But what are you claiming? Do you think there's a difference between slaughtering a cow outdoors and doing it indoors? Do you think it's morally superior to do it on a stainless steel slaughterhouse facility? I don't.
Yeah, and have it in packaged. I mean, I don't know. Do they eat these cows? Isn't it just a sacrifice in this?
Look, you're asking the wrong guy. I assume they eat them. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
okay. Of a million animals to appease a goddess.
By the way, sorry, but one other thing. This is a comparison. Like, what a ridiculous response. Like, oh, but here's a picture of dead cows, and here's a picture of one element of Christianity.
You can't even compare it.
How can you compare it? Well, I compare it. I'm sorry. So which one has committed genocide on more continents? Hinduism or Christianity? Sorry, who wiped out the indigenous people of South America, Australia, Canada? Who? Was it Hindus? Was it Hindus who did that? Would you Hindus go around the world conquering people by the sword and forcing them to convert to Hinduism? I mean, I'm sorry. Which one is more like celebrating Adolf Hitler or Mao Zedong? Because the Hindus, these Hindus specifically in Nepal, they may still sacrifice cattle, but they're not guilty of the crimes of the British Empire, let alone getting into the Spanish Empire or the other great empires of Christendom.
And celebrating the supposed birth of Jesus with an ill-placed nativity scene, prayers, and some Christmas carols. I'm not sure what Buddhist holidays you're referencing here, but since Buddhism is compatible with atheism, I'm not sure how it's relevant to your overall point.
Oh, because you know so much about Buddhism, my dude. Because you know so much about Buddhism compared to me. Oh, you're barking up the wrong tree right now, homie.
In fact, the main point of your video is that atheists need to replace the rituals, songs, etc., normally associated with Christmas with something else. And you can do that with Buddhism.
Let me just be clear again.
Right.
I have a 5-year-old daughter who memorizes the cartoons she watches. You may also, I mean, you don't have to, but many children, they really do memorize and mimic and repeat the cultural forms they're exposed to. My daughter is not a unique example of this. Yes, I do not want my daughter memorizing and repeating this kind of crap. I think you also do not want your daughter or your son memorizing and repeating back Islamic rituals, Islamic text, Islamic, dogmatic songs and statements. Why is it so hard to sympathize with? If you are an atheist, I can understand if I was talking to a fundamentalist Christian, but if you are an atheist and you reject Islam and you reject Buddhism and you reject Hinduism, why is there this unique exception for this one festival, for this one holiday, where you can't sympathize with them and says, hey, I want to provide my daughter with something better.
Because presents.
Better than Curious George, better than Santa Claus.
Because presents.
Better than Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Because cookies.
And you can do that with Buddhism.
Okay, Muslims have cookies too. Let's be honest, right? Hinduism has cookies too.
I'll link a few sources below, but some Buddhist sites recommend celebrating Christmas by meditating, focusing on charity work, or by helping.
Oh my God! Are you an atheist at all? Yes, because endorsing meditation is so different from endorsing prayer. Oh my!
Helping a suffering animal. Buddhism also has a whole set of holidays, replete with rituals and all that other good stuff that many people...
Sorry, you think I don't know this? I was the one referencing Buddhist annual rituals. I was a Pali scholar. I was a scholar of Buddhism for more than 10 years. I have peer-reviewed publications on Buddhism. I've lived in Buddhist countries for years and years in Southeast Asia. I studied their languages, history, and politics. You're quoting Wikipedia to prove what here? What does he think he's proving to me? I made a mention of Buddhism in passing, parallel to Judaism, Christianity, Islam as just being another religion. And you think this is a refutation of my view. Oh my God. This is mouth-breathing level of ignorance.
Are drawn to.
You wouldn't have your children participating in any of these supernatural rituals. Moreover, okay, sincere question. Guys, look up right now any of these mass Buddhist rituals where you have a bunch of people meditating in front of a statue and they're playing music and they're chanting magical words, mostly in garbled Sanskrit. I'm sorry, if you just do the little bit of research, just as you looked at that field of slaughtered cows, and you'd think, I don't want my daughter being there participating in slaughtering those cows. I do not want my daughter being brainwashed by any of the big mainstream Buddhist groups. And I think it's, if anything, it's much more dangerous, precisely because on the surface level, the aesthetics are more appealing. Like, if I actually took my daughter to witness those cows being slaughtered, she'd probably become a militant vegan. She'd probably be like, wow, this is terrible. This is disgusting. Just even the smell of slaughtered cows is awful. Guess what? Buddhism, sure, you can go and there's this real nice, tranquil surface layer, and there's a guy playing a wooden drum and chanting in horribly mispronounced Sanskrit, and repeating these magical ideas that come from various sutras, and wearing these appealing robes, and people sit and meditate. That's much more dangerous. I don't want my daughter doing it. I don't want you doing it. And if anything, it's because the exterior is more seductive. Look it up. But are you an atheist? Are you a skeptic? You don't look at a bunch of people sitting in formation, chanting an ancient Sanskrit text and meditating, which is just so different from prayer, to a magical ritual, trying to get magical effects or magical outcomes, and you see no problem with that. Stamp of approval. I'm sorry, this is just a contrast between people who are real atheists and people who are fake atheists at this point. Whereas it is genuinely disputed and contested today whether or not Jesus Christ ever was an historical figure, or if his origins are entirely mythological, whereas it is disputed whether or not Moses ever was an historically real person, or if he's just a mythological figure. There's no debate about Adolf Hitler, and there are certain segments of society who celebrate the birthday of Adolf Hitler. There are still segments of society who celebrate and revere Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong, Lenin. Your choice. Why would you want to keep your child separate from all of these holidays, all of these celebrations? Have any of them killed as many people as Christianity?
Let's just say that Jesus did live. Let's say he was a real man who lived, preached, and had a small gathering of followers. I'm not aware of him killing millions of people. In the Bible, he doesn't call for the mass extermination.
Oh my God!
Jews. He doesn't set up gulags or concentration camps. He didn't starve.
Neither did Karl Marx, you idiot. I don't want my daughter worshiping the Communist Manifesto either. So the fictional character of Jesus didn't personally murder millions. Neither did Mao Zedong. He didn't personally murder millions of people. Celebrating the life of Mao Zedong represents your approval of. Oh my God, this is just the stupidest. Is this guy still in high school? I can't guess his age by his voice. This is 12-year-old level just misrepresenting what I've said. And what I said was so clear there. How can you misrepresent? This isn't subtext. This is on the level of the surface layer of the text, misinterpreting and misrepresenting what I've said. I don't even like this is just debating with an idiot. An idiot who identifies as an atheist, but who isn't.
In the Bible, he doesn't call for the mass extermination of Jews. He doesn't set up gulags or concentration camps. He didn't starve, torture, or imprison his political adversaries. To compare Jesus to Hitler or Stalin is silly. Now,
I'm sorry. I did not. You're just misrepresenting me. I compared Christianity, the empires of Christendom, to the Nazi Empire and the various communist empires, such as the Soviet Union and China. It was very clear what I said. And I asked you a question that you dodged. You didn't answer. I said, which one has killed more people? Okay? Why is Australia full of white people speaking English? How did that happen, homie? Do you think the Christian church, do you think Christendom did
Why is all of North America and South America full of white people speaking English?
Speaking Spanish in South America. How did Spanish and Portuguese become the majority language of Mexico and everything south of there?
Yeah.
You got any insight on that? How did Spanish and Portuguese become such widely spoken languages? Why isn't it one of the languages of India? Why isn't everyone speaking Sanskrit, homie? Well, what do you think about that? I mean, the history of genocide committed in Jesus' name is real. And you are dismissing that on the grounds that Jesus personally didn't commit genocide. Oh my God. Yeah, and you know what? The principles that made communism so violent, they are in the writing of Karl Marx. And that's why I reject even the writing of Karl Marx. It's not the case that there's some clear moral division where Marx is good, but Stalin is evil. Joseph Stalin was very sincerely trying to interpret and implement the philosophy of Karl Marx. Mao Zedong was also. Those guys knew Marxism. They had somewhat different interpretations and took it in different ways. Mm-hmm. The communists in Cambodia were really sincere communists. They read Karl Marx. And all of these people were sincere Christians. The Catholic Church, the sickest thing of all is understanding that the Catholic Church, from their perspective, had good intentions in carrying out that genocide because they believed good and evil as they got it from the Bible. Oh my God, I'm debating with a mental 12-year-old here.
I have argued that the Christian belief in hell is abhorrent, and most Christians I've talked to say that hell was taught by Jesus. So I'll give you that. If Jesus was a real person, and if he did indeed teach that we deserve to be tortured for eternity, then he was an awful human being. But to say that teaching people that they deserve hell is on the same scale as literally killing millions of people is just ludicrous and, again, not a fair comparison.
And the cold, hard truth of rational, nihilistic atheism is that there are no excuses. The Christmas tree
is beautiful? I mean, it's not nearly as beautiful as my baby puppy Dexter here, but I do like it. You know what you won't find in my house or on my Christmas tree? Anything remotely religious. There are no Jesus ornaments or little wise men figurines. You'll just find pretty lights, a few superhero ornaments, and some colorful bulbs.
Has to be thrown on the dustbin of history, along with circumcision, burning witches, conversion by the sword, so many barbaric, regrettable traditions.
Again, there's a world of difference between burning witches and celebrating Christmas. It's like you just think up the worst possible examples and then put them up with a holiday that is largely benign. If we start stringing up witches on those trees, then I'll gladly take your comparison into consideration.
You're not just competing with the Christmas tree.
I don't know how old this person is, and I don't know anything about your channel.
I know.
You just said that somebody had responded to your.
I know his apartment. He doesn't look like he's 12 years old. If he has his own apartment with his own Christmas tree.
If that's the case, these are really.
It's just stupid. It's
really
not salient.
These are really like, oh, the Christmas tree's beautiful.
Yeah, I know. Well, but sorry, but he doesn't respond to any of them.
What about how
isn't Ramadan beautiful?
Is.
I'm sorry, isn't worshiping the Kaaba in Mecca beautiful? Everyone wearing matching costumes and doing this dance around the Kaaba in Mecca.
The menorah is beautiful.
What about the
light candles?
Isn't it beautiful celebrating the standard Zen ritual every morning of waking up and this particular wooden drum being played and chanting this garbled Sanskrit sutra? And how about whatever, we can get into Taiwanese folk religion and Taoism. Isn't it beautiful? Is it right or is it wrong? And I'm sorry, do you think you could have this perspective, white boy, if you were born Cree or Ojibwe or an indigenous person of the Hawaiian Islands? Do you think you would have this perspective that Christianity and Christmas is harmless if you were one of the last people struggling to speak the indigenous languages of California, like Yurok, or out in the middle of the Arizona desert trying to cling to the last of the Dene languages? If you were ethnically a member of one of the peoples destroyed by Christianity, okay? Ethnically, I'm Jewish. How do you think I feel about Martin Luther and Lutheranism? There's a very direct connection between Lutheranism and anti-Semitism. Luther basically reinvented anti-Semitism. You guys can look into it. He wrote a book in German called Die Juden und ihren Lügen, The Jews and Their Lies. It totally galvanized and redefined anti-Semitism, and it was held up. You can see photographs of this. The photographs of the crowds at Hitler rallies when they did those. There were people there holding up Martin Luther's book, where the form of Nazi anti-Semitism was very much a direct inheritance of an expansion of the anti-Semitism of Martin Luther. Obviously, the Gospels are less anti-Semitic than Martin Luther, and Martin Luther is less anti-Semitic than Adolf Hitler. But nevertheless, Martin Luther was an extreme anti-Semite, and he created a whole new movement of anti-Semitism that led to, eventually, the deaths of millions of people. How do you think I feel walking past a Lutheran church and knowing that? And yes, my relatives, my ancestors did die in the Holocaust. They were exterminated. I also have relatives and ancestors who were exterminated by communism to some extent, by the way. And I've known people face to face who were who suffered terribly, and their relatives were exterminated by anti-communism, by the American bombing of Southeast Asia. These things are not unique. It's not just Christianity. There's plenty of suffering to go around. Do you think you could divorce the symbols of Christianity from what they symbolize? If you were an indigenous person in Hawaii, if you were Cree or Ojibwe, if you were one of the peoples, any of the peoples who've suffered under Christian imperialism. And again, if you go to North Africa, there are people there who know that they've suffered under Islamic imperialism and who oppose the Islamicization of their society because they know the history. There's one guy I knew, again, there are very few of these. There was one guy I knew who was ethnically from central Afghanistan. And he really knew that his people and his tribe used to be Buddhist, and they were forced to convert to Islam at the sword. And he was genuinely interested in reviving Buddhism as a religion within Afghanistan. Obviously, the guy was really an atheist. Obviously, he was a modern atheist. He wasn't interested in going back to medieval Buddhism or something. But he thought it was really important to emphasize, look, Islam is not the indigenous religion of Afghanistan. This was done to us. We were conquered by an empire. Our Buddhist monuments were destroyed. Our temples were burned down. And we were given a choice to either to convert to this religion or die. And here in Canada, that is not ancient history. That was still going on in my childhood. And fuck you. All you've got to say is, the Christmas tree is beautiful, so it's okay. If I was choosing my religion based on the architecture, I would choose Islam. There are Muslim temples with gorgeous architecture all around the world. If I was choosing my religion based on the food, probably I'd choose Taoism. Taoists have good food. Actually, South Korean Buddhism, they have pretty good food too. If I was choosing my religion based on the tea and coffee, oh my God, the aesthetics of what religion is. When are we going to move past this? It's mind-blowing to me. This is a lot stupider than I could have possibly imagined. Christmas tree. You're competing with the Sistine Chapel. You're competing with the assembled beauty and sculpture and works of art and architectural accomplishments and traditions and songs and poetry of centuries and millennia. And what are you going to replace it with?
I'm glad you asked. We're replacing it with a secularized version of Christmas. About 8 hours like this unscientific.
Good. Right, yeah. Okay, so if that's good enough for you, I don't think this guy has kids. If that's good enough for you, fine. But if you're an atheist, you should be able to sympathize with me saying, that's not good enough for my daughter. I also don't really want my daughter growing up with Curious George. Not that Curious George is evil. I'd like her to have something better and more meaningful than Curious George. I'd like her to have something better and more meaningful than Mickey Mouse and Batman and Superman and Spider-Man. And those are secular icons. And they're icons and they're culturally influential nonetheless. My childhood was influenced by Batman. I've talked about that before. In many ways, Batman may be more influential than Christianity, maybe in Manhattan Island today, and the most secular parts of the United States today, among certain kinds of cynical teenagers growing up. If that's good enough for you, I think you really have to question the sincerity of your own atheism. I think you're being very insincere and duplicitous. I don't think you're lying to us. I think you're lying to yourself. But why would you be incapable of sympathizing with me and my position when I just have to say that is not good enough?
I took this unscientific poll on Twitter where I asked whether it was a good idea for atheists to celebrate Christmas. So far, the overwhelming majority think it's fine. And if you comb through those responses, you'll find atheists who don't think about religion at all, but who celebrate family, food, presents, friends.
Right, you never answered any of the questions I posed. So what about Muslims? Is that how this culture of Saudi Arabia is going to change? Is that how the culture of Malaysia or Turkey, relatively moderate Muslim studies?
Secular Ramadan.
So everything's going to stay the same in the next 100 years. And in your lifetime, nothing's going to change. You're not going to challenge the Christian establishment in any way, not even with your own child or the school your child is enrolled at. And you're fine with your child going to a majority Muslim school that celebrates and teaches Muslim holidays. You say, oh, just conform. Just go with the flow. Just celebrate, family and love and generosity and the other and the food, and enjoy the architecture and enjoy the beauty of the Christmas tree and enjoy the decorations in the mosque. Enjoy the mosque architecture. Enjoy the music. Enjoy the aesthetics of it while not believing in it. And then, Christian-dominated society never has to change, and Muslim-dominated society never has to change. Think about the next 100 years, homeboy. Think about the next 1,000 years. Yeah, you know what? You got 82% of your followers on Twitter support your position. That's not surprising. And guess what? Those are the people who are not going to lift a finger to make any kind of positive cultural change or any kind of positive political change. We can do a poll of vegans. Hey, who thinks veganism is just a lifestyle? Who thinks veganism is just about being healthy and sexy and fit? And probably it's 82% of vegans. Okay, what percentage of people actually want to get organized and go lobby provincial parliament, go lobby the state legislature on this animal rights issue involving elephants or dolphins or something? Maybe it's 1%. Maybe it's 2%. That's the 2% that's going to change the world. Who do you think made seatbelts mandatory? We'll do a poll back in 1952. What percentage of people want seatbelts to be mandatory? 2%. Who cared? 85%. I don't give a fuck about seatbelts. Fuck it. I don't care. Guess what? 2% of people got organized and changed the world because they cared. They wanted to make the world a better place. And exactly what's utterly lacking in this contemporary atheist discourse is any sincere impulse to try to make the world a better place.
And a few days off work. This closely mirrors something I read in an article recently. Here's what it said. Quote, "Such friction has long roots in American history," says Boston University religion professor Stephen Prothero. "Christmas may be a religious holiday, but it's also deeply secular, creating a natural conflict. There have always been people in America who want to make it more religious, more Christian," he said. "But the reason they're doing that is that Christians have largely lost control of the holiday." His 2003 book, American Jesus, talks about how Jesus has been claimed and remade by other faiths and cultures in the United States. The same has happened with Christmas, he says. "It isn't just a Christian holiday anymore. It's a lot of other things," he said. Ironically, he adds, maintaining that balance probably helps keep Christmas front and center. End quote. Some atheists have replaced it with things like Newton Mass. But the bottom line here is that, like the Grinch, Christians stole Christmas, not from the who in Whoville, but from the pagans who celebrated the winter solstice. And since then, it has evolved further. It has been largely secularized, and you can celebrate the holiday without celebrating Christ. To be honest, it's a bit funny to me that Christians will often talk about giving up worldly wealth, but their stolen sacred holiday is now a day built on rampant consumerism.
I don't feel I'm stepping into the shoes of anyone else who's made this effort before. That's the weirdest thing. If you come on the internet and say you want to start a new fad, a new idea, you have a lot of precedents to look around at.
You're a real trailblazer, my friend. The groundwork is already done. Now, feel free to make up your own way of celebrating Yule or whatever you want to call it, but millions of us have already done that and continue to do.
You haven't made up anything. You're just doing exactly what you were taught by your parents.
Right.
I mean, things have not changed for decades.
No, but show me
centuries. Like, this is how you celebrate Christmas. What do you mean that you've been
show me
innovating?
The storybook you read.
Yeah.
Show me the storybook you read to your daughter. Show me the cartoon you show your kids instead of the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer cartoon. Show me the alternative. Show me the songs you sing. Because, again, partly for language practice, I'm looking for that in Chinese and, in the past, Japanese. I'm not studying Japanese anymore. I've looked at it in French and German, not just English. But English is this mega language globally. You're not producing that. You're not engaged in cultural production. You're not competing with Rudolph and Santa. You're not competing with Disney. Where is
Jingle
it?
Bells. Like, let's just put up Christmas lights. Let's just put up.
Right.
I mean, the name is Christ, has Christ in it. It's based off of.
And look, this came up. There was a vegan on YouTube who wore a Nazi T-shirt. He wore a swastika on his T-shirt. Mm-hmm. So in that context, I mentioned this. okay, him wearing a t-shirt that is pro-Adolf Hitler, that has a swastika on it and is pro-Nazi. It had the word Nazi on it also, the particular t-shirt, okay? So it's completely explicit. It was a Nazi swastika. It's not a Buddhist swastika or something. Why is that bad? It's not bad because he's directly hurting anybody or killing anybody. I think the particular guy has never hurt anyone. He's never assaulted a Jewish person or burned down a synagogue. It's not bad because he's in any way involved in or implicated in or morally responsible for the atrocities committed by Nazis, okay? Mm-hmm. The symbol is bad because of what it symbolizes, because of what it tells me about you. It tells me you, the guy wearing that Nazi t-shirt, is willing to conform with and collaborate with and cooperate with neo-Nazis. Mm-hmm. That he approves of and supports, in the past tense, something Adolf Hitler did and something the Nazi Party did. Okay? Your Christmas tree and your Lutheran chapel, the outward trappings of Christianity. Here in Canada, you don't think they're symbolically related to the genocide of our indigenous peoples, the disappearance of our native language, the whole transformation of this culture on this continent by Christendom? You don't think so? I think it's much more powerfully connected than the British flag or the current Queen of England. The Queen of England can say she's not responsible for that or that her crown doesn't symbolize that. That is absolutely what Christianity symbolizes. And again, what if you were an indigenous person from South America or Hawaii or any of these places that were ruled under by Christianity? It is true the symbol regarded in isolation is not evil and is not harmful. The Christmas tree doesn't harm anyone. And that's why these comparisons are important, is that you're just less familiar with the other symbols. In Mecca, the Kaaba, the celebrations of Islam, they in themselves do not hurt anybody. There's no harm. But what do they symbolize? Mm-hmm. They symbolize the total destruction of Afghanistan, which didn't just wipe out Buddhism and animism and what was generally a more permissive, open-minded society that easily could have become today at least as modern and westernized as a place like Japan. There was the potential there. It created an absolutely horrible society that we all deplore, today dominated by the Taliban, a society that even moderate Muslims deplore. Okay? That was what was created by that. So by approving of that symbol, it tells me something about you. It's not really a moral judgment on the Nazis, and it's not really a moral judgment on the Christmas tree, and it's not a moral judgment on the Bible or Jesus. It's about you and what kind of person you aspire to be, and what kind of society you aspire to be a part of, and what you're willing to do as an activist or leader of public opinion to try to achieve it. And we all know, homeboy, in your case, it's nothing. You think it's harmless to raise your kid celebrating Christmas? Then why don't you think it's harmless to take them down to the mosque and raise them with Islam? Why don't you think it's harmless to raise them in Hinduism? You think it's harmless because it's familiar. You think it's harmless because the constant barrage of advertising has made this particular religion, its particular superstitions, lies, cultural values, irrational inanities, seem so familiar.
I do sympathize with your point here.
So why didn't you make a video saying that?
Yeah.
Exactly what, we're now in the last minute of the video, exactly what has been missing here is sympathy. You could have opened with, this is a middle-aged man. I'm 40 years old. I have a 5-year-old daughter. This is a man who wants to do better for his own daughter and his own family, who's struggling to provide an alternative to Christmas and something meaningful in his daughter's life, and who's interested in publishing this storybook so you also, with way less effort, can buy the storybook and read your kids something meaningful that's not rooted in Christianity or communism or Islam or something awful. Mm-hmm. Why isn't there sympathy, and why isn't there a positive tendency, like I said before, to recruit talent for us to work together? Yeah. Have me on your channel. I mean, the level of hostility, self-righteous hostility, you sound like a Catholic. I just
want to say, yeah, I mean, I know it's normal for me to agree with you, but like, I mean, when you say that it's just about being familiar, that really is the case. And I feel like you are going to encounter criticism.
Right.
Like, forever, by doing this. And like, as you said, agreeing to put up a Christmas tree, agreeing to do the whole shebang of getting presents, having a Christmas tree, putting them under the tree, blah blah blah, having a big celebration with a bunch of meat and dairy and horrible food. This is all the trappings of Christian society, and it's saying that you will agree with other Christians. You can cooperate with other Christians. And that's really, like, I think the fundamental difference is that I don't want to cooperate. I don't want to just do what my family has done. Like, if I were still, like, if I hadn't been, if I hadn't started a relationship with you and moved away, like, if I were still in Michigan, I think I would still feel this way. I would just not want to celebrate Christmas, because even for me, like, just the food aspect alone makes it, like, impossible for me to want to sit down at a table with my family when they're eating this horrible carnage food. And like, so the food alone, the religion alone, I mean, all of these are factors that make me not want to participate in it. And it shows me that, like, really the only thing that you feel differently about is that you don't believe in God, but you're willing to cooperate and, like, do the same things as everybody else in the society. And this is why, I really hope that we do move to Taiwan. Like, I really want to be part of a culture that is not Christian, because it's sad for me, like, thinking, like, I am totally, like, down with what you're coming out. I think, like, the stories that you're coming up with are great, and I love that it's meaningful, and, like, that it's about Socrates. And yes, like, I want these stories to be out there and for other families to start celebrating this, but I feel like it's going to be such a small, like, minor change. And I feel that way about veganism too. Like, I just want to, like, instead of being up against opposition for the rest of my life and, like, trying to raise a child in a society that is so, like, based on Christianity, even if you say, like, you're secular now, even if you're celebrating Christmas in a secular way, it's still based on it, and it's all the trappings of Christian society. I feel like I would rather, instead of putting up with that opposition and constantly being on, up against a brick wall, living in it, instead moving somewhere else where, like, more people are vegan, more people are not Christian, more people are just either secular or Buddhist, which is just not,
Look,
and it's sad for me because I like you said, I wish there was more cooperation. And like with veganism, when you first started your channel, there was so much backlash, like, with what you were saying, but, like,
nobody's trying to recruit talent, nobody's trying to work with you, everyone's working against you.
Like, why can't they just say, like, oh, okay, like,
why don't you do a fundraiser for my children's storybook for
everything? Maybe I like still want to celebrate.
If you work in the fashion industry, you're not going to recruit anything.
But, like, like, when I first started when we first started watching this, I was thinking in my mind, like, maybe I will, like, just appreciate that this video exists at all, because I remember seeing you were, like, writing on Twitter, like, nobody is responding to this, or, like, nobody in the atheist, like, crowd on YouTube is wanting to cooperate with me, or, like, want to even make a response video to this. All I'm getting is negativity. And this is,
it's illustrating the negativity.
Unfortunately, it just seems to be negativity, and like saying, like, oh, well, we already have the atheist alternative to Christmas. Which is Christmas. Oh, wow. Novel thinking. Like, really, you think that we aren't thinking that way? Like that we want something different. So yeah, I mean, it's sad that they can't just be like, all right, maybe you're right, man. Like, maybe after reflecting on it, I haven't been thinking about Christmas in this way, and now I can think about it differently and try to come up with something else, or maybe support you, or keep saying, you'll
just sympathize. You just say, hey, that he personally is going to keep on celebrating Christmas, but he sees this as a positive project to write new stories and make new cartoons and new storybooks, because the world needs more quality children's entertainment that's raising legitimate philosophical issues and interesting ideas for kids in a relatable way. I also have a background in cult studies, I would say. The elements of Buddhism and communism that are cult-like. And I've talked about the elements of political movements that are cult-like within veganism that are cult-like. And, I should be preaching to the converted here when I say to an audience of atheists, religion is dangerous.
Right.
So
Can we all get behind that?
I have the option of raising my daughter Jewish. Right. I also have the option of becoming a citizen of Israel, by the way, if you didn't know. If you're Jewish enough, you can become a citizen of Israel. 2-month process kind of thing. Why do you think I don't teach my daughter that she's part of a special, magical master race of people that God chose? and that the whole world's history is about her, and that Israel is the center of the world and the most important people in the history of the world. It's all... Why do you think I don't teach her that? The ego trip itself is dangerous. And again, I've grown up... Look, the vast majority of Jews I knew were atheists. The majority of Jewish rabbis I have met were atheists. They were people who valued the tradition and the ethnicity and the culture, and who did not believe in God. They did not believe in praying to a God who would listen to you in it. They did not believe in that. The vast majority of Jews. Judaism is still an incredibly dangerous religion, partly because it tells people things they want to hear, like, you're special. You're part of a special master race. And the atrocities being committed by the government of Israel don't matter. And they're okay because of this specialness. The scale of the atrocities, the world-transforming effect of the empires of Christendom is many orders of magnitude larger. And it is, most of my time on this channel, I'm criticizing communism. Mao Zedong is responsible for a minimum 30 million deaths. I don't even want to, probably it's more than 50 million, but minimum 30 million deaths. Cambodia, another one of these disasters in communism. But even if you're an atheist Jew, you're a Jewish family that is openly atheist, and you teach your kid, no, God is just a superstitious idea, or it's just this tradition of the Bible, but you're only teaching them the other components of secularized Judaism, or completely secular Zionism. That is dangerous, and you guys should be able to relate to that. And I really think the only reason you can't perceive that danger in Christmas is exactly what I've already said and what was quoted back. Because it's familiar, and because you associate it with, gift giving and your grandma feeding you food you like, or whatever it is. I said this in all the videos, you would expect a Muslim to have more moral courage than that. You would expect an ex-Muslim to stand up and say, no more, we've got to change. No more arranged marriage. No more circumcision. No more female genital mutilation. No more Ramadan. That's what you expect people to do in Malaysia and Saudi Arabia and Indonesia and Turkey. You expect them to stand up and say, I don't want to live in the medieval past anymore. I want to represent an optimistic, different, better future culture. And you won't do that yourself when there's no risk, and you won't even sympathize with me when I'm doing it, and it costs you nothing to just say, hey, good effort. Not everybody's satisfied with Curious George, and not everyone is satisfied with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Yeah. And it's not just Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Even in school, they're singing and they're hearing songs that say, the Lord and Savior is come. That is what Christmas is about. It's not Rudolphmas.
Silent night, holy night.
Why is Santa's name Santa? Do you know the meaning of the word Santa? He's a saint. The level of self-deception here. What do you think you're celebrating? Silent night, holy night. I grew up singing that.
I don't think you're entirely wrong either. You can certainly make a compelling case that Christmas can, and sometimes does, embolden Christians and make them feel as though we're adding legitimacy to their nonsense beliefs. And you're right that we do celebrate Christmas and not Ramadan because of the culture we were born into. But I also think that when atheists do celebrate Christmas, they're making it their own and actually lessening or removing the Christian elements. Over time, it will likely be a wholly secular holiday to most, except a few fringe Christians who will continue to celebrate it as if it has religious significance. But maybe I'm wrong and you agree with Boz.
Anything more to say? I feel like I've said it all.
Yeah, maybe you think that's the future, but
it's the ultimate lazy, self-indulgent fantasy that Christianity is just going to get weaker and weaker and disappear from this earth. I don't think you're saying that about Islam, and you're not saying that about communism. So even if it were true of Christianity, have you been to Georgia? Yeah. Have you been to Las Vegas? Las Vegas, Nevada is still an intensely Christian town, despite the gambling and the prostitution and the strippers. It's mind-blowing. In America, you have these juxtapositions, but these are intensely Christian places. Just look at the list of Christian colleges and Christian schools. How many people are still going to Catholic school? Even in my own neighborhood in Canada, Christianity is a tremendously powerful force.
People still homeschooling their kids
with
Christian
even
curriculum.
If that were true, even if I conceded the point that Christianity is just going to wither up and dry away without you lifting a finger, without you getting uncomfortable, without you making the effort to offer an alternative to Curious George and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, you have to recognize that's not going to happen with Islam. Who is going to drag Afghanistan into the 21st century? How is that going to happen? You know, you're kidding. Who is going to drag China out of communism?
Yeah.
How is that going to happen? I'm very interested in that also. Yeah. You know, I mean, I'm sorry, but the depth of self-deception here, it is a fatuous, self-serving deception. Like I said at the beginning of this video, that all you have to do is sit back and laugh. All you have to do is sit back and scorn these people. No. And you're going to win.
You need to create, as you always say, I mean, you have the manifesto on your channel. I mean, we know somebody, we have a friend who, you know, she knows that God isn't real. Like, I mean, like in her own personal belief system, she is atheist. But because the Christian church is organized, because that's where you can bring your kids for childcare, where you can meet other mothers who are raising children of their own, where there's a community, where there's people around with common values, you know, like about being a morally upright person. I really don't see the church going away if there's no alternative, if there's no other community. Like if atheists don't get together and say, okay, well, this is a group of people where we're all involved, like we're trying to be bringing families together and stuff. Like, no, I mean, especially with how society is moving toward being less and less connected. I think there might be in a future where there's a backlash, like, oh, let's get more church, like more people into church, just because we're all dealing with loneliness inflicted by, you know, our and we have lived through. So you guys probably guessed, my girlfriend is younger than I am. We have lived through an era of religious wars since the year 2001. I can remember what the world was like before 2001. My girlfriend, somewhat less so. You have some memories because you're just a lot younger than me. Mm-hmm. Your whole life has been in the shadow of wars between the American Empire and Islam. Broadly speaking, just to simplify a little bit. And my early childhood was the American Empire versus communism, the Soviet Union particularly. And, you know, that's a big change in the world. If you think religion matters less today, how about those elections in Iraq? I mean, even if you look at the Republican Party, I'm sorry, if it's true in the Democrat Party, it's true Obama and the Clinton family, Bill Clinton, going to church. You wouldn't believe all those people went to church like clockwork. Totally cynical. But I mean, you know, all of those people are repping that they're good Christian souls. You think religion doesn't matter in American Parliament, in American Congress and the Senate. You think religion doesn't matter in Iraq's Parliament and Senate. You must be kidding. These are tremendously powerful forces on planet Earth. And there are always rewards for being a conformist. Melissa, you recently met a woman with a PhD face-to-face who knows how evil the Communist Party is, and she's a Communist Party member. Yep. She's going to conform her whole life. She's going to march the party line. She's going to toe the party line, however you want to put it. My teacher, who I was close personal friends with in China, Communist China, she's a member of the Communist Party. Yeah. She knows the reality of what communism was and what it still is. And she's decided to compromise. She's made that commitment. And I noticed, I think both of those women, they decided to never have children. They're both child-free, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. Do you want to raise your children believing that Mao Zedong was a good person? Or do you want them to know the truth? Do you want to know about the deaths, the harrowing, horrible deaths of tens of millions of people? I mean, we're not going to get into it here. Do you want to be honest about this? Do you want to be honest with your kids about why Afghanistan is Muslim and what they were before and how that happened? It was conversion by the sword. It was an unbelievably brutal history. The real history of Muslim empires rising and falling and what they've left on earth, including the slave trading and the forced circumcision of adult males, literally with the sword. I've read stuff that'll give you nightmares. And I've already said this 100 times in this video. If you think the British Empire is prettier, in some ways the British Empire is even worse. Comparisons are odious, but they're both incredibly bloody and brutal empires
that, have that have resulted in cultural genocide on an enormous scale. So, the question you have to ask yourself is, do I want to live a lie? And if the answer is no, what is the truth worth to you? For me, it's worth making that little bit of an effort to try to make original stories and probably cartoons and storybooks and puppet shows. We got the puppets here for Socrates and the Fox and Socrates and the Panda. We're going to actually act these out, make it fun and interesting for my daughter. And those stories I'm writing, I'm totally comfortable with my daughter memorizing, with performing them year after year after year. And they have a fundamentally more positive message than singing Silent Night, Holy Night. And they are fundamentally way more meaningful than Curious George. All right, 1 hour and 30 minutes, babe. That's a wrap.